Is your book a one-hit wonder or is it built to last? Well, stay tuned to this episode of the Author Switch podcast because I will be talking about tried and true tips to make your book evergreen and last as long as you want it to.
Are you an entrepreneur, small business owner, or consultant looking to boost your authority, influence, and impact? The Author Switch podcast with best-selling, award-winning author Carma Spence is your answer. Tune in for actionable advice, powerful strategies, and engaging interviews to turn on your author switch and take your business to the next dimension.
The Author Switch.
Hello and welcome to the Author Switch podcast. I am your host, Carma Spence, and I help executive coaches, business leaders, and consultants write, publish, and market client attracting books so that they can grow their business. And today I'm going to be talking about evergreen books. First of all, what is an evergreen book? What am I talking about here? I'm talking about books that can maintain relevance, appeal, and value over a lifetime. It can be the author's lifetime or it can be longer. So I'm going to be sharing with you here some books that are examples of evergreen books. The first is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. That was first published in 1936. My dad was 1 year old. My dad is now dead. So that book actually lasted more than a lifetime. And of course, the author is no longer around. And yet, here it is. It is still going. People are still reading it. It's still valuable. That's an evergreen book. Another example is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. That was first published in 1989. There are probably people listening to this podcast that weren't around in 1989. Oh, I was. But again, timeless content that's lasting a really long time. Stephen Covey is still around, but he's not a spring chicken anymore. And here he is, continuously earning royalties from his book, 7 Habits. Another one, and I actually have this somewhere in a storage because most of my books are in storage right now, and that is The Joy of Cooking by Irma Rombauer. That was first published in 1931. 1931. Wow. That was a long time. In fact, I said my dad's age. Wrong. Yeah, because he was born in 1931. So he was 5 years old when the first book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, was published. This book, The Joy of Cooking, was published the same year my dad was born. That is wild. That is wild. And yet it's still a good book. The recipes are all tried and true and foundational, and it's this thick. It's this thick. It's a great book. If you like to cook, The Joy of Cooking should be on your bookcase. Another one is What to Expect When You're Expecting by Heidi Murkoff. That was published the year I graduated from high school, 1984. When I got pregnant back in 93, I actually bought a copy of that book. I never did read it and I never did need it because I had a miscarriage. But that is like a classic book. If you're pregnant, you get this book. You read it so that you know what to expect when you're expecting. Great title, by the way. And if you listen to all these titles, they're all really good titles, which plays into part of that evergreenness because they're timeless titles. And then here's one of my favorites. It is also on my bookshelf, and it's called Strunk and White's The Elements of Style. And that was first published in 1918 and was written by William Strunk Jr. Well, E.B. White was one of his students and really liked that little book that Strunk had written. And so Macmillan and Company, after Strunk had died in 1946, approached E.B. White. And yes, I am talking about the same author of Stuart Little and Charlotte's Web. He took that book and expanded it. That's why it's called Strunk and White. They didn't write it together. They didn't write it together at all. Strunk wrote it. Then, after Strunk died, E.B. White took it and expanded it, and it's become a staple of grammar and writing style. So, again, very, very evergreen. 1918 was a very long time ago. I was not around then. So that's what I mean by evergreen. Now, if you were paying attention, you will probably have figured out why these books are evergreen. But I'm going to go into next how to identify topics in your niche that are potentially evergreen. So you want to choose topics that have timeless appeal. Timeless appeal. So topics with timeless appeal, they help solve a fundamental human need, a challenge that's common to people, or a desire that persists across cultures and generations. It's kind of like in the hierarchy of human needs. You want to focus on universal themes, topics like love, self improvement, leadership, or overcoming adversity. These can resonate widely with a large group of people. You can solve persistent problems. These are problems that are not going to go away. Regardless of what technology or new gadgets come, the problem is still going to be there. And some examples would be, what are the pain points that your audience commonly faces? They always faces. These are things like managing finances, improving health, achieving work-life balance. So for example, my books that came out earlier this year talk about how to come up with a book idea, how to write an outline, how to write and publish your book, and how to market your book. Regardless of what happens, those books could probably last well beyond my passing from this particular life, because those are persistent problems. People are always going to want to know, how do I come up with a really good book idea that will attract clients? And the principles I talk about in that book are timeless. They aren't based on anything in particular. They're principles. They're not trends or things like that. So what in your industry is not trendy, but persistent and universal? You want to leverage foundational knowledge. Again, what I was talking about, that's all foundational knowledge. You want to explore subjects that are the building blocks of expertise or skill in your niche, like foundational principles or core frameworks. And of course, you also want to consider generational relevance. You want to choose topics that can adapt to new formats or examples without losing the core message. So, for example, writing has been around forever. Well, maybe not forever, but since it was invented, it's been around, and that was a really long time ago, beyond human memory. And nowadays, there are ways to do writing that is different because we've got AI tools and we've got grammar checkers and things like that. But the foundational principles of writing are still there, regardless of all these fancy trappings. And if you don't understand them, those tools won't do you very much good, because if they break them and you don't know that, oops, you get crap. Just say. Now, you also want to be able to differentiate between a trend and an enduring issue. Trending topics focus on specific current events in technology or cultural fads. So if I were to start talking about Taylor Swift, well, Taylor Swift's really hot right now. But if I started talking about Milton Berle, people might be going, who? Who's that? Now, some of you I know who Milton Berle are, but some of you may not. He's no longer trending. He hasn't trended in a really long time. He probably hasn't trending since I was a little kid. If he was ever trending, honestly. But anyway, you get my point. Taylor Swift is hot right now, but she may not be hot tomorrow. Here is a quick litmus test for timelessness. First, ask this question: will this topic still be relevant in 5, 10, or 20 years? Step 2, analyze. Is the core issue tied to human nature or a passing trend? And then you want to balance. You want to incorporate examples and scenarios that can be updated while the main content remains foundational. Now, you may notice that I keep talking about updating. Later in this podcast, I'm going to be talking about setting up a regular updating schedule to keep your book evergreen. Even 7 Habits of Highly Effective People has been updated. So has how to win friends and influence people. And it's this ability to be updated that also helps your book become more evergreen. Now, that's the foundational information. After the break, I'm going to be talking about how to make updates and create new editions so that it keeps your book evergreen. I'm going to be talking about how you market an evergreen book. And then I'm going to be talking about tracking the success over time so that you know when to do all those things properly. My name is Carma Spence, and I'm the author of Serve Up Your Book, a book about book marketing throughout the entire life cycle of your book, from before you start writing all the way to after you launch. A lot of authors don't think about book marketing until the book's already written. The problem with that is your book may sell or it may not. But if you bake marketing into your book from the get-go, you have a much better chance of reaching bestseller, of selling more books, and converting readers into clients. I think the most surprising thing that most authors that I've talked to who have read the book have found is the idea that book marketing starts before you even come up with your book idea. You bake the marketing in from the get-go. When you do that, you are much more likely to have success with your book. And most authors just don't think about it that early. Do you want to sell more books? Then read this book. Serve Up Your Book, available now on Amazon. Hi, and welcome back to the Author Switch podcast. I am your host, Carma Spence, and I help executive coaches, business leaders, and consultants write, publish, and market client attracting books so that they can grow their business. And an evergreen book is a great client attracting book if you do it right. And if you followed the tips in the first half of this podcast, you're probably well on your way to creating a really good, strong, client attracting evergreen book. But once you have that book, what do you do with it? How do you keep it evergreen? And how do you make sure that people find it? That's what I'm going to be talking about in this half of the podcast. First up is how to update the book so that it maintains relevance. You want to plan for periodic updates. Now, those updates can be more frequent or less frequent depending on the topic of your book. So, for example, a book that is about social media, that one would have to be updated way more often, probably even every year. But if you're talking maybe a book on the foundational principles of PR, yes, some of the trappings of it, but the principles are the same. That one might not have to be updated until like maybe every 5 years. Some books don't even have to be updated until every 10 or more. It all depends on, again, on the topic of your book. For example, aromatherapy, maybe. The aromas aren't changing. Maybe how you diffuse them is, how you use them, how they're available, but that one might be a more longer term book. Cooking, another book that doesn't have to be updated that often. Look at Joy of Cooking. I don't think it's been updated all that much at all. And it, again, published in 1931. So it depends, again, it depends on your topic, but you want to figure out how often am I going to need to change the examples or the case studies or add new information. So for example, if you had written and published a book on AI writing in January, you'd already need to update it now because the tools available have changed and it hasn't even been a year yet. If you write a book on social media, if you wrote it before TikTok became a hit, now you're going to have to add a chapter about TikTok. And if you included a chapter on Clubhouse, you might want to take that out. And don't even get me started on MySpace. That was the hot thing when it first came out. And now, it's a wasteland. So again, it depends on your topic. How often do you need to update it? You are an expert in your industry. You probably have a good tap on how often the content that you talk about needs to be updated. And then you want to balance the evergreenness with the aspects of it that need necessary revisions. You may decide that you want to leave out content that needs to be updated a lot and just stick to the principles. That is a very valid strategy. Or you have two options when you update. You can continuously republish the book in a new, this is the fourth edition, the fifth edition, the 21st edition, the 123rd edition. You can do that. Or you can leave the core of the book principles, things that won't change, and then add like addendums on your website. And maybe people don't get access to those addendums unless they join your email list or join a low-cost membership site, something like that. Those are ways you can keep your book relevant while allowing for the ebb and flow of trends. Now, how does your marketing evolve over time? So, like, first you set up your update schedule. Once you've got that done, you know, okay, I'm going to update this every year. I'm going to update this every 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. I may never update it. Whatever you decide, it's your business, your book. You decide. Then you want to start tracking changes in your niche so that you know if your schedule needs to be adjusted. You want to stay informed on things that are happening in your industry, and you want to know what your audience preferences are. Now, I'm going to take this out of the book realm for a moment. Montgomery Ward. Montgomery Ward was the top of its game in catalog sales back in the day. And then the internet came, and they didn't innovate to take their catalog and put it online. They decided not to figure that out, and now they don't exist. And Amazon is doing exactly what Montgomery Ward did, but they're doing it online. Kodak didn't want to innovate into digital photography, and it was the dominant photography company for over 100 years. It was a really long time. And then they didn't make that one innovation, and bam, they're gone. So if you don't stay on top of what's going on in your industry, you may go the way of the digital dodo, so to speak. Next, you want to collect reader feedback. And that can be either people who are following you, reading reviews on Amazon, putting out surveys, those kind of things. Find out what readers are requesting. Are they asking for more case studies, more examples? Do they want different solutions? Find out what they're saying about your book and what they think is missing or what they think they would like more of. That's part of the reason why I include this step before you even write your book. Find out what other people are saying about other books so that you can make sure that your book is just the next step. Then you want to update data and research. You want to refresh your statistics, studies, research findings, all those kind of things in the book. And that may be what gets updated over and over again. Then you want to add or revise tools and resources. Now, here's a tip. Have a domain that you know you're going to keep for the long haul. Ideally, it's your name. Like I have carmaspence.com. I'm never going to get rid of that. And then you create a page on that, and that is the resources page. And then all you have to do is update the resources and tools page all the time. You don't have to keep republishing the book. When you're updating your book, things you want to look for are things about language and design. Has the language or the design standards change so that you want your cover to look modern. You don't want it to look like it came out of oh so yesterday, unless that's part of the vibe of the book. You're going to want to modernize language and design when you update it. Adjust fonts, cover design, chapter formatting. Give your book a fresh look when it's updated. But keep the core content consistent. You don't want to radically change it. So, for example, my book, Home Sweet Homepage, I have published a second edition. There probably will not be a third edition. I found that I need to change the content sufficiently enough that I might as well just write a new book if I decided to go there. But when I published the second edition, the main information was the same. I used a few different examples. Interestingly enough, one of the biggest complaints I had about the second edition is that some of the examples were irrelevant because people thought that people weren't doing exactly what they still were doing. Yeah, I guess they didn't think I looked at that. I did. I did. But, what I probably did wrong was that people in my audience, the people who will be buying my book, probably already knew better than to do those particular examples. But I was writing it for a much broader audience. So there you go. When you update your book, you want to announce those updates strategically. And you probably want to put it somewhere on the book, like now updated for 2025. Include new strategies, tools, now with a new chapter about writing with AI, whatever it is that you're adding or changing. Let people know, hey, this has been updated with new information. And then you want to budget for those updates because you're going to need time. You're going to need money for editing, design, that kind of thing, and possibly even team support to get the word out. So when you know you're going to update it in 5 years, start saving a little bit a month or a little bit every year toward the cost of that update in 5 years so that you don't have to come up with it then. You've already got it in the bank. All right, so next is how do you track the success of your Evergreen book? Well, you want to track sales data, and Amazon does that for you. Amazon does track it. It's not as ideal as it could be, but it gives you at least a good ballpark of what the sales are. And if you can monitor the analytics of anywhere else you're selling it, like Smashwords, Barnes& and Noble, wherever you may be selling your books through, they all should be giving you sales data. If you can, this is not always an option, but if you can, track sales by ebook, paperback, hardcover, so that you know which one is selling better. Is it the ebook? Is it the paperback? Is it the hardcover? Why is that particular format selling better than the others? Find out, figure it out. There's usually clues and evidence that you can figure that out. You want to evaluate conversion rates. So whenever you are making marketing efforts, always document the time period that you're doing any particular campaign because you're going to get the sales figures 3 months later. And that's just how it works. Yay. I wish it didn't work that way, but a lot of times you're not going to get your sales data for 3 months. And that's because they're allowing for people returning. So if you did a campaign in August, mark that in your calendar. And then in November, you'll get the sales data for August and you'll find out, well, was my promotion in August effective? And what's really cool is that you can look, you'll see spikes in sales and then go back to your document of what you were doing during those times. That's why if you can document when you're doing various promotional activities, whenever you see a spike in sales, you can go back, find out what you were doing that worked, and then do it again. You want to monitor online engagement. Use tools like Google Analytics. Are more people visiting your website after a spike in sales than at other times? Then you know your book's effectively driving people to your website. You want to gauge long-term performance. So how is it doing now? How steep is the drop off in sales after launch? Are there spikes? What happens to cause those spikes? I mean, the spikes could be caused by you doing something, or they could be caused by seasonal changes. Like, for example, do you have a spike in sales around November, December? Maybe people are buying your book as a Christmas gift. If you're getting reviews, monitor those patterns as well. And you want to monitor the review patterns of your competitors' books as well, because that helps you understand what needs to change in my book to make it sell better. And if your book is only an ebook, you can continuously revise it. And what's beautiful about that, at least if the person bought it on Amazon Kindle, every time you revise the book, they get all the revisions, which is pretty cool. When you can, engage with your audience directly. Conduct surveys, polls, gather information from the people who are following you so that you know what they want and so you can include it in your book. Monitor social media feedback. How many likes are you getting on book-related posts? How many shares are you getting on book-related posts? Those kind of things. What about your book-related posts is working and what is not working? Adapt to evolving needs. Update your content or resources based on feedback that you receive from members of your audience. Leverage email analytics. Are emails that are talking about your book having higher or lower open rates? Why? What can you do to fix the lower open rates and what can you do to capitalize on the higher open rates? And of course, as new marketing tactics become available, try them out. Experiment. This is what I love about book marketing. It's like a big laboratory. And you just do experiments and you try it out and you go, okay, did this work? Did that work? Why didn't it work? If something doesn't work, why? If something did work, why? So you can do it again. These are all things you can do to help make an evergreen book stay evergreen. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. This is Carma Spence saying ciao for now. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Author Switch podcast. If you enjoyed today's show and want to support its mission, here's how to help. First, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Your engagement helps my channel grow and reach more aspiring and established authors. Your ratings and reviews are invaluable. They help me reach more listeners and continue delivering top-notch content. To catch up on past episodes, including those no longer available on podcast platforms, visit authorswitch.com/episodes. There, you can choose to watch or listen to your favorite episodes at your convenience. If you'd like to show additional support, consider dropping a tip in the tip jar at buymeacoffee.com/Carma Spence. Your contributions help keep the podcast running and are greatly appreciated. Thank you for being a part of the Author Switch community. Until next time, keep writing.